right, and welcome everybody to the next episode of Fantasy Romance February, Pharaoh Feb or Pharaoh Feb. Tonight's guest is Sydney Ashcroft, and from Maine. And let me find my little notes here. So, Sydney is from originally from Pennsylvania, but she now lives in Maine. She has had cats. She's fostered beagles, full-time in the information technology field. And she loves tea, chocolate, and folk music along with wine. Her partner is Dani Nichols. She's in California. They're partners on the book Chasing Destiny, which is available in store and through our website. And she also loves wine as well. So here's a quick little cheers to Dani, who couldn't be with us tonight, being out in California. For all those who are joining us on through Zoom, if you just keep your mic and your video off just to keep down the confusion, that'd be great. Use the chat box to relay, and I'll relay any questions, or Sydney, if you want to bring them up too. Yes, Carrie Moser, you should pour a glass as well. For Facebook, if you're on Facebook Live, feel free to use the comment section for any questions or comments that you have. And I'm going to turn that down. So without further ado, we have welcome Sydney. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me to do this. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. We've had you in store before. It was a good time, kind of when we first started. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your book, Chasing Destiny?
So Chasing Destiny is, I classify it as a paranormal romance, but my publisher has classified it as an urban fantasy. So take the difference. It is set in World War II. It starts behind the enemy lines in Germany, in Berlin. And it features an immortal named Acantha. She is approximately 2,400 years old, give or take a few years. And she is spying deep, like I said, behind the enemy lines for the against the Reich. She is working as a personal assistant to Heinrich Himmler. And she learns that the Germans are going to trying to find the Spear of Destiny. And the myths around the Spear of Destiny is that it has the power to shape the fate of the world. So upon hearing this, she takes it upon herself to try to find the spear before the Germans do. Kind of in the Indiana Jones vibes from Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I adore that movie. And along the way, she gets help from Matthias, who is an old friend of hers and an old lover. And eventually Damianos enters the picture as well. And he is another immortal that she actually knew him when she was mortal. They met way back in ancient Greece. When they were still, before they were immortals. And this book tells the story of their race to find the Spear of Destiny before the Germans do. And in the process, her relationships with Matthias and Damianos and how they are affecting her and her quest to find the spear.
So you mentioned Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I was going to mention as well. So is that kind of what got you the idea of plot for the book, or?
No, sort of, a little bit. It definitely influenced it. But there was a quirky little show on Sci-Fi called Warehouse 13. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen it. It's basically these Secret Service agents. They go around and collect these artifacts that have some sort of power, and they, put them away to keep them away from being used. And it was along that vibe I thought of these guardians of the treasure, who collected these powerful weapons and kept and items and kept them away from being used against the world in general. And so it was that, along with the Indiana Jones influence, that inspired this book. But also my all-time favorite movie is Casablanca, which has that old romance, that old lover coming back into the picture of somebody's life with Rick and Ilsa. And so it was kind of a combination of those three things that inspired this book.
So this the like the Ark of the Covenant, this the Spear of Destiny or the Holy Lance, the legendary lance that pierced the side of Jesus. Did you do any research? Is that something that you just knew about?
I knew about it, but then I also did research on top of it. Um, there were at the time, the whole myth. I love, especially, mythology and this whole the paranormal world with these objects, mythological objects that we have. Um, and the Spear of Destiny is probably one of the biggest that's out there, besides obviously Excalibur, because who doesn't know about Excalibur? But we wanted something that wasn't so mainstream like Excalibur. So we went with the Spear of Destiny, considering it's probably one of the most powerful, where it has the power to shape the fate of the world. And true, real facts about World War II is there was a spear in Vienna that is said to be one of the 10 spears, in existence, that people think. And Hitler did actually acquire that one. And then he lost it, and not lost it as in don't know where it was, but he lost control of it, and it fell into the Allies' hands right where at the point where the war was starting to turn towards the Allies' favor. So it's kind of like, well, is it the real one? Does it really have that power? And it's intriguing.
Now, if you're for those who are Indiana Jones fans, you know that in the movie, the first one, especially, or the first one, Hitler was a fanatic as far as finding these religious artifacts and stuff. How true is that? Did you find in your research? Did you research Hitler and what he in the Third Reich and some of the other
Yeah.
characters?
Yeah, Hitler was generally interested in the occult, but it was actually Himmler himself who was very big into the occult. He's the one who built the castle there at Vesselberg. Sorry for any pronunciations that I totally mangle. And he was the one who was really desperately trying to tie in the Nazi beliefs to the legends, these legends from history, of like the Teutonic Knights and the myths that surround Germany and those legends. But Himmler was really the big guy in terms of being into the occult.
And so you took all that legend and lore and put that in along with the romance. Now, I have read the book. I thought it was fantastic.
Thank you.
There's a lot of action in it. It's not a large book, a couple 150 or so pages, 60 pages, something like that. But it really moves right along with all the action and stuff in it. And there is a little bit of romance. How did you work that? How did you decide to be a fantasy romance writer, at least for this book here, versus a sci-fi or more of a historical fiction in the sense of like an Indiana Jones or going with the Nazi thing?
Well, that's the funny thing, is it didn't start out as a romance. It started out as a historical fiction, just this legend of the Sphere of Destiny. And I had these two characters, Acantha and Damianos are the two that I had, and I wanted they were from role-playing times. So I wanted to like do something with them because the role-playing game stopped. And so I was like, all right, fine, I'll write this book. And then I thought about those two more and more, and I was like, well, he was her first love, and how do you deal with this relationship or this knowing somebody for so long? What happens when they come back into your life? And the same thing with Matthias is, she met him, I want to say 1307, I think it is. He was a Knight Templar, which I love the whole history behind the Knights Templar. And again, he was another one that she had a romance with. She was with him for 200 years, and then they just parted ways. And so now she has two of these guys that she absolutely loved to come back into her life, probably at the worst time when she has to deal this. So it's how those two relationships really affect her as on a personal level, and how it affects her goal and her quest to find the spear.
Now she starts off as I want to say it's either ancient Greece
Yes,
or
ancient Greece.
ancient Greece, as a acolyte to one of the goddesses, servants to the goddesses.
Yep.
But she's mortal, and I don't remember which one. It wasn't Matthias. It was the other one.
Damianos.
Yeah, that's where they met.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I loved about it is that you went back and told her backstory as to how she became an immortal and how those two met, and a little bit of that. Did you have to do any little bit of research on ancient Greece, or?
A little, and I only say a little because when I was in college at Penn State, I took a minor in history, and um, I started with a class on ancient Greece. Then I went to ancient Rome, and then I went to early medieval society, and then I went to the Middle Ages. And then, of course, just to round things out, I took a class on the US Civil War, which totally did not fit with all the others. But so it's that love of history that I wanted to use, and I wanted to incorporate flashbacks to Acantha and Damianos's relationship over all these 2,400 years. And so I just picked these time periods that I was most familiar with, and I still had to do research on them, but I picked these time periods that I particularly love, which was ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and I believe the 1500s, which was the Battle of Flodden. Sorry.
There goes mine, right?
It was the Battle of Flodden, which was right during the time of Henry VIII.
So have you been to Greece or to Rome, or?
I have been to Rome, and I love Rome. I've been there twice. Can you please stop barking? Thank you. I have been to Rome and Florence, and walking around the Roman Forum, especially, is just it's you see all this stuff and you're like, wow, and then it dawns on you, like, Julius Caesar walked here, then it hits you like the magnitude of how old Rome is. And you're just walking among the ruins, and you're in the museums, and you see all this art, and it just, like, that weight of history you start feeling that weight of history on you. I have been to London, but I have not yet gone to Greece, or I have been to Germany, but not, unfortunately, up to Vesselberg or Berlin. I was in Munich and Frankfurt.
So were all these travels before or after or during writing the book?
During. Some of it was during, because when I was in Germany, we took a lot of day trips. I was there for work, but we got to travel around a lot. And while I was there, I was like, oh, I wonder how far Vesselberg is from where we were. And it was just a little bit too far to make a day trip of it. So I didn't get up to there, but I did get to see a lot of Europe. But like I said, I'm a huge history nerd.
So while you were there, did that work its way into your book? Is that like scenery, or just some of the other names and places?
It did, as like they were traveling, like I have pictures from the trip, and kind of use that as what they would see as they were driving, especially when they were in the Germany parts. And Rome, the ancient Rome piece actually isn't in Rome, it's in Carthage, because I love Hannibal and the Punic Wars. But yeah, someday I do want to get to Athens, and I do want to get to see, I believe Carthage is now in present day Tunisia, and Turkey too, where the Temple of Artemis used to stand, and see the ruins of that.
Excuse me, I have to ask, is that a Medusa ring?
Yes, it is.
I like that. I like
Thank
that.
you.
Um, so how did you come up with the names of your characters, of your immortals?
Um, we kind of look. I didn't go for historically accurate for Acantha and Damianos, um, because we just really don't have too many records besides the famous people from Greece back in those times. But I did kind of want a Greek feeling to it. And Acantha, which is spelled with a C regularly, it means thorn. And there's there's the running joke that Damianos always accuses her of being very thorny, very prickly. So that's how her name came up. And hers, or his, I kind of wanted something that kind of suggested like demon, but not come out and say that, and like Damianos. So that's kind of where I got that one from.
It's one of the things I like to do when I'm reading it is to kind of figure out where some of the names came from, unless it's like John Smith or something like
Mhm.
that. But I just recently found out that when I was looking for the book Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, which we have in the store, by the way, um, and realized that the name of one of the main female character, her name is Lenina, and it reminded me of something. So I googled the name, and I found out that that's also the first name of the main character in Demolition Man.
Mm.
Uh, what's her name?
Huxley.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's Lenina
Yeah,
Huxley. I
yeah,
was trying to think of
yeah.
the actress,
Sandra Bullock.
Sandra Bullock, her character. And so I read that the director or the right screenwriter for Demolition Man took
It from A Brave
Lenina's
New
name
World.
because the premise of the movie is kind of based around Brave New World,
Mhm.
Aldous Huxley's. So
Yeah.
they put the names together. So I find those kind of things fascinating, how people kind of use, or writers put or the name is actually a meaning
Mhm.
as part of their book and stuff. So
I do the same thing with I play D&D.
mhm.
And I do that with my D&D characters. There's always a clue to about their character or who they are in their name. And I did it. I run games too, and I had a copper dragon. His last name was Cuprum, and my players were like, "Who is this guy?" And I'm like, "There's a clue in his name." And they never figured out that Cuprum is Latin for copper, meaning that he was a copper
Uh,
dragon. And I'm like, "Guys, I gave you a clue, you know." So
so your character, she gets back together, or she meets up with the two immortals that she's kind of hopped through time with. Um, so well, let me start with this. Um, so this is Fantasy Romance February. Thanks to H.R. Moore for or Harriet Moore for letting me be a part of this and kind of doing our own thing, glomming onto her thing. Um, how would you define fantasy romance compared to just regular romance or romantic fantasy?
I always describe anything with fantasy in it with that fantastical element. That not our something beyond our mundane world. Whether it be, being immortal or being maybe a shapeshifter or something, something that adds that fantastical element to something. And obviously, this is my publisher classifies this as an urban fantasy, which is basically, our world with some fantastical elements to it, which when I was growing up, we never had that. It was either you read high fantasy or you read science fiction or you read a romance novel, a historical romance novel. Um, I do like that the genres are now not as structured and they're a little more fluid, and that they're kind of combining. Um, like I said, I didn't intend to get into a romance. This was going to be a more of an straight urban fantasy, and that romance just kind of happened and took part of the book. So I was like, okay, we'll roll with it. So now that's where we're going, and I do consider myself a romance writer. But I love just having more than the normal world in stories.
Well, I remember remember that the romance scene. And so reading the Pharaoh Feb website, she defines the different ones, and then there's within that there's different heat levels. So for our audience out there who's wondering what is the heat level of your
Sorry.
book?
It's R2 telling me I have a text.
Ah,
I would say it's moderately high. I mean, it's not into the realm of erotica, but there's some pretty detailed events in the book. But it's nothing. I mean, oh, high graphic. This is Kyoshi. It's high. It's definitely high because there are a few scenes where clothes do come off.
um, so let's talk about working with a partner.
Mhm.
So we have had we do have another um, uh, set of books in the store that one is here or one is in Maine, one is actually in British Columbia, Canada, and they collaborated together. Um, and the two of you, you and Dani, have collaborated on that book, and it sounds like you're collaborating on the next one.
Mhm.
So what's that like trying to collaborate with somebody on the opposite side of the country?
Well, we've been writing now. What is it? 2021. So we've been writing now for 20 years together. We started in 2000. 2000. So yeah,
Yeah.
almost 21 years now. It'll be 21 years later this year. We started writing fan fiction together. We started over way back in IRC when we had IRC. For those who don't know what IRC is, just an online chat room. And we started sharing stories, like, hey, we kind of had characters that um, we wanted to put together. And so we started writing together, and we started writing on AIM, AOL Instant Messenger. And back then we would swap paragraphs. She would write like a paragraph or some dialogue and then send it to me through AIM, and then I would respond, in character. And that's how we wrote our fan fiction. And then we started putting them into Word docs, and then we would just send the document back and forth. This was way before the days of online file sharing and all that. So now it has evolved to, we use Google Drive. We save all our stuff to there. And now that I'm not working nights and she's still working nights, we're totally opposites. So when I have files open, she's at work. And then when I'm not at work, she's working. So we don't step on each other's toes. That's how the logistics of it, but the actual process, we'll talk and we'll get an idea and say, hey, let's do a story about this. The next one that's coming out has Durandal in it, which was the sword of Roland, who was a knight of Charlemagne's. So we said, okay, let's do this. What characters do we want to use? Do we want to use Acantha and Damianos, or do we want to come up with some new ones? So we came up with some new ones. I generally basically plot out. I will do a rough plot. I will outline it, and then I will send it to her and say, what else do you think needs to go in this? What else do you think should happen? And we'll talk about it, and then we'll kind of finalize the outline. And then one of us will start on chapter 1, and we will write as much as we can, and then we close the file. And then when the other one is online, they'll open the file and either pick right up there or like start ahead in the next chapter, because we have that outline. We know what's going to happen. So we kind of do that. Most of the time it is me just kind of blazing ahead and just getting everything out. And then we always joke that she pretties it up. She comes by and makes it pretty. So I'm more of a, let's get from point A to point B as fast as we can. And then Carrie will come, or Dani will come in and start adding stuff and more details and fleshing things out. And then we do the same thing for the editing process. I'll go through it, and then she'll go through it, and then she'll give it back to me. And sometimes we'll let it sit for a while. but we'll just kind of keep sending it back and forth when we're editing. And then when we're ready, we submit it to our publishers, see if they want to pick it up.
Have you ever had to read any major uh, uh, conflicts, be it
Oh
in the
yeah.
plots or the editing, because
Oh
you or
yeah.
she wants to say something a certain way, but the other one kind of wants to change it for something future down the road. But no, this is what I want to say.
Yeah, we do have our disagreements once in a while, and it's kind of, we'll argue and we'll "Rah," and then we'll just like, okay, let's take a step back, and then the next day we'll come back, we're much cooler heads, and we'll be like, all right, let's talk about this. What do we want? What works? Um, 2 years ago in 2018, when we were still being able to travel, we went to Romance Writers of America, their conference in New York, and it was after the day we were out at dinner at Butter, which is Alex Corniscelli's restaurant. And I don't even know how we got started, but we started talking about a plot point, and we just sat there and just argued like back and forth like the whole dinner. I was just like, and our voices started getting up there, and we were just like, okay, let's stop. It's a noisy restaurant. We're just at this point almost yelling to each other because we're emotionally involved in this, and it's loud. So we're just like, all right, let's stop. Let's take a step back, and we'll see how we approach this.
So, where did you two meet? How did you were sharing story, doing the well, is any of your fan fiction available for been
Mm,
published, or is that just something that you kind of
It's
stuck
just
in the
something we did.
drawer?
It was Marvel fan fiction, so we can't publish anything of it
Nah.
because we don't own the characters. But it was an IRC. It was a IRC chat room for comic book fans and fanfic writers. There was a whole community out there, and Danny and I were on at the same time because I worked overnight from 8 to 8, and she would get home at midnight her time, which was 3 in the morning, and I'd be I was like one of 5 people on at that time. So we started talking, and we both loved Wolverine, so we started writing stories about him, and that's how we started writing together.
So, were you ever so upset about something that she crossed out or suggested or something that you waited until she got home at midnight, 3 a.m. here, to call her up on the phone and say, "What's the deal?"
No, I'm the type that I'll explode off the bat. Like if I get angry, you'll know it. But then like an hour later, I can just be totally cool about it. I'm like, all right, that's all right. We had our spat. Let's just move on. Let's see what will work. Um, there are a few things which I'm not going to spoil for the third book, fourth book. I don't know. It's like, I think it's the fourth book. There is a little thing in the fourth book that we have planned that I wanted and she didn't, but I was just like, no, and I kind of had to justify it as a plot device. And I don't think she's still too happy about it, but I was just being stubborn, and I'm like, no, we're doing this. We share characters, but we still have our characters. Like Akantha is totally mine. Like
Mhm.
basically decisions around her is kind of my, like I make the final call. And then there's one that we'll be introducing in the next book. Her name goes Catherine in the next book. Her real name is Marie, and that's Carrie's. So like I would never ever decide something for that character without clearing it by through her, because that's kind of hers. And then there's some that we just share and we just pass back and forth that we just kind of go, okay, that makes sense, or no, that doesn't make sense, and we'll kind of negotiate on it. But there are like stuff with Akantha, I'm just like, nope, this is it, this is the way it's going to be. And she's the same with Marie.
Now, for the romantic heat level, are you two kind of on the same page, or has she ever wanted to go a little less, a little more?
We've always been on the same page of that. We don't write interactively as like we used to, where it was like every paragraph we would switch off. But we would write smut like that, where she would take one character and I'd take the other, and we'd write the smut, and I was usually the guy. I don't know how it always happened, but I was always the guy, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But we've always been on the same page with that.
So have you gone to a lot of when you could go to conventions? Did you? Well, when you came to visit us
Mhm.
when we first opened the store, and it just so happened that came out here, and then you would go out there 6 months later, or in the wintertime or something like that, and you did that back and forth, didn't you, for a little while? And
Well, she comes here every year, about the December 27th and stays till January 4th or 5th or 6th around there. Just because we have this tradition every year for going to see Ellis Paul in Portland and then in Cambridge for New Year's. That's the only time we can actually count on seeing each other. Everything else is kind of like, oh, hey, let's take this cruise, or we'll pick a cruise, usually an Ellis Paul cruise that we'll go on together. And occasionally I show up at her house without her knowing about it. Which, if you knew Dani, she does not like surprises, so that was a fun time. My While I was waiting for her to get home, um, I was like, well, is she going to call the cops thinking that somebody is at her house, or thank God she doesn't have a gun and I'll get shot, because she didn't know I was coming. So that was a total spur of the moment. Hey, I'm going out to California. We're going to surprise her. But most of the time, our trips are planned, whether it be a vacation or her coming here for our New Year's traditions. So it's about maybe once, twice a year. I'd say the average is about twice a year we see each other. Our next planned trip was supposed to be to September of 2020, but how 2020 went. So September of 2021, we're going to Croatia on a cruise, for a different musician. And I'm excited because there's a lot of Game of Thrones locations in Croatia.
yeah, so what's on your mug?
It is a D&D mug.
Okay.
So there is a beholder, and then when it's hot, it shows a different scene with a beholder and a
Oh,
guy
okay.
running away. So
Okay. I used to play D&D when I was in high school, so we're talking, well,
yeah,
30 some odd years ago.
mine was
Um,
mid 80s.
yeah, mid 80s, that's it. Early mid 80s, when it was really, really big. We do all weekenders. I'd go over
Yep.
friend's house, spend all weekend, pizza, popcorn, chips, all that kind of stuff,
I
sleep there. And
always had to leave because it was just me and all guys, so I wasn't allowed to stay for
ah.
the weekend.
But I remember I had a blast doing it. My cousin still does it now. You obviously do it. You can see all those characters in the
My
background.
action figures, they're all Marvel
Yep.
action figures.
Okay. But you do have a 3D printer.
I have two now.
You have two now. Ooh. So you have another side thing. You do you make boards, you make or not boards, but cases, dice, all kinds of. How did you get into doing?
It started by going to like craft fairs to sell my book, and I think one person selling D&D jewelry, dice jewelry made out of the D&D dice. And I was like, that's really cool. It's like, I could do something like that. And that's how it started. So now, I have jewelry made out of the dice. I make the dice cases, and I print up dice towers on the one 3D printer. And I'm just starting now to get into actually making dice.
Do you play online with other people, or did you obviously maybe got together, but you couldn't obviously for last year, but do you do it?
Yeah. I have 3 games a week. On Sundays, I run it. Sunday mornings, we do have a Twitch stream. We don't do video; we just do audio because video bogs down everybody's computer. So Sunday, I run it. Tuesday night, I used to run it, but we just started a new campaign, so one of the other players is running it now, and I actually get to play, which is nice. And then on Thursdays, I play. So I run one and play in two.
Have you ever thought about uh and Carrie actually beat
Yeah, I
me to
see
this
that.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, she beat me to the question because that was going to be my next question. Have you ever thought about doing something either with Dani or on your own, incorporating D&D type? You're a fan of Game of Thrones. You're a fan of the Dungeons and
Yep.
Dragons, obviously.
So funny enough, I started a high fantasy novel a couple of years ago. Probably got about 12 chapters in, and my Sunday campaign is now basically that novel. I basically went, hey, that's a good plot idea. And so I basically just went, okay, we're going to do it for a D&D campaign. So yeah. So basically my campaign is based on the novel that I started writing. So it'll be interesting on how D&D finishes because the book's not finished. And then there's also a book that I've been tossing around and mulling about in my head. And it's more like people my age in their mid 40s. Well, I'm starting to get to my late 40s now, but basically, kind of going back to a high school reunion and deciding to play, and they get sucked into the actual D&D world, and they have to get out. And I'm like, they're actually playing their D&D character, and I'm like, yeah, that's really something I really want to write, but right now I'm just trying to get everything that we have in progress done before I start something completely brand new.
So is that first one you're talking about, is that based on the adventure that you're doing right now? So after you're done, questing for the day or
Mhm.
for the evening, whatever, a couple hours, do you go and write down what happened and use
No.
that as
No, I
and just keep a
don't.
rolling thing until it's finally finished, and then you got yourself your book?
Yeah, no, I don't do that because um the characters that other people play, that's their characters. Like I never want to take their characters unless I have their permission. Um I kind of want to see how the D&D campaign ends, so then I can say, okay, well, maybe the book will go in that direction, but maybe it'll go in a different direction. Because, like I said, I'm like 12 chapters in, and I haven't touched it in probably about 4 years. But I like the idea of the plot enough that I was like, hey, let's do a D&D adventure for it. So I keep notes from this every session that we do. So maybe some of those events will actually make it into the book at some point.
So you mentioned you take notes and you tend to do an outline for your other books. Now you said you're working on book 4 or your fourth book with Dani. How do you keep them straight? Do you have different physical files for them, or do you do, I guess it's
Yeah.
Scrivener?
We use Scrivener to write, so we just create a new Scrivener project. I have a Scrivener project for every book, so that way everything is for that book is there. And it's just the name of the file is basically the name of the book, and then in another Scrivener file we have it's our story Bible. So basically in there's where we keep the notes for characters, because our characters are crossing into over other books, the immortals. We needed a centralized place for all that information, so we know where to look if we need to find information. So each book has its own project, and then all the information for the characters are in a different file, like kind of like an encyclopedia, if you will, for those characters.
So you also have another helper, your brand new little cat
I have two cats, brand new two cats. They're only a month
who
apart.
oh we follow you on Facebook, and you're posting pictures every once in a while of your cat sitting right in the middle of your computer. How tough is it to work with when you're trying to work and to write with your cat always?
um, well, it's usually Kiyoshi who you saw. He's the one who usually likes to jump up, and he's the one who sits right in front of the monitor. And I just kind of like go around him like this, just to see around him, because he's usually fascinated by the mouse movement and whatnot. And then he'll get up on my shoulder, and then I'm like, okay, we're taking a 10-minute break because we need cuddles. And then I just put him off, and I'm like, I got to get back to work, gotta get back to writing. So I'll put him down. Titania, or as we call him, her TT, is not a cuddler, but occasionally she'll come up and like stand on the arm, and I'll just give her scritches, and then she'll go away. She's not as hindering as Kiyoshi is.
Now, is that your Maine Coon?
Yeah, Titania is the Maine Coon.
Yeah, beautiful cat, beautiful
Thank you.
cat. So I was going to ask. Um, you also fostered beagles. Do you
Mhm.
still do that?
I do not have one at the moment. I have not had one in about a year and a half, mainly because last April my beagle passed away. and they were the rescue, which is Beagles of New England State, which spells out bones. Um, they were like, okay, you just lost Maddie, we'll give you a break, because I had that dog for 13 years. So I had a break, but then I got the cats. So I was like, well, I can take a foster as long as they're good with cats, because I don't need that chaos of a dog chasing the cats in the house. Even though I have a dog and she's cool, but beagles are a whole nother level of dog to deal with. But I think we did talk. The foster director and I did talk probably in January, and I think I'm going to be getting a new one this spring. So
Nice.
that'll be number 23, I think.
Wow. Wow. So you mentioned that you do cuddles for 10 minutes with your cats to take a break. Is that something you just do kind of to appease the cat, to get the cat out
Yeah.
of the way? Or so what do you do though when you get bogged down, when you can't think of something? We've had some who get up and listen to heavy metal music, some who go out, take a quick walk. What do you do to kind of get yourself unstuck when you're writing?
um, well, I usually write with music, but usually to get unstuck, I'll do something else totally not writing related. I have my crafts, the dice cases, the dice, and other stuff going on. Um, I have taught myself how to crochet, so I do that. Sometimes I'll just go take a shower just to relax, and there's something about warm water that kind of just gets the
Mhm.
mind, because a lot of times I'll be in the shower and then I'll get this thing. I'll be like, yeah, I can do that. It's just like out of the blue. And I'm like, great. Or I'll just watch a TV show or something.
You bring a waterproof pen and stuff in the
No,
shower with you in case you have a thought so you don't forget?
no, I lie to myself like every author does. It says, I'll remember that later. And
When you get it's because I know you're also remodeling your house.
Mhm.
Do you get so super frustrated at some point that you just say, okay, that wall's coming down right now?
It's super frustrated, and okay, I'm gonna go finish that. Like whether it be painting or something, I'm just like, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
finish that, work on the house. My kitchen is in the middle of getting remodeled, slowly but surely. I'm thinking about writing a short story about the saga of the fridge.
Yeah, that's quite the.
But I have holes in my ceiling right now, so I got to patch those, and there's still some painting to do around the house. So, it's kind of like I kind of save those until when I hit those blocks, and then I'm like, yeah,
Mhm.
suddenly I want to do house, work on the house. And
How do you get yourself started? Do you have rituals to get yourself started? In the morning? Would you prefer to write at night? Or do you
well,
purposely write opposite Danny so that you can throw the stuff at her when she's home and ready to do it? Or
I work during the day. So obviously I'm focused on work during the day. But if something comes up, like pops, I'll write it down, just write a quick note so that after work is, when I can sit down and write. Um, I kind of do it by days now. Like Tuesday night is D&D, Thursday night is D&D. So it's like I don't plan on writing those nights, because I know that's D&D night and my mind is not focused on writing at that point. It's focused on playing a character. Um and then the other nights, it's if it's something I have to do for around the house that has to get done, I'll do that. Um if I have a show or a craft show or something coming up, then I'm like, okay, I got to get this stuff done. The craft stuff that I sell, I'm like, okay, the next 2 weeks is just, devoted to getting this stuff done at night. And when I'm not really like, when I'm like, okay, tonight really is not scheduled for anything, then I'll sit down and write.
do you go through some kind of, I don't want to say ritual, but kind of the same thing? Do you get your sit in the same
Mhm.
spot, or get yourself a glass of tea or coffee, or a glass of wine or something first? And we've had some who do, they're more spiritual, so they get touch a little, tap a little
Mhm.
gong just to kind of get themselves in that space.
Well,
Do you do anything like that?
I run on tea,
You run into.
so I have to have tea. Um, Another thing I do is very I have always been a music person. So when I write a book, when I'm dealing with these characters in my head, I make a playlist for them. It can either the songs that I pick either represent the individual characters or their relationship to each other. And so I keep those playlists. And then when I'm focusing on that book, I'll put that playlist on.
Hmm.
And just the music that I'm taking in helps me to get into those characters and get them talking, as we say, we get them talking. So that's kind of my ritual. It's just tea and music and what do I need to work on tonight, or what do I feel like working on tonight. Editing is my downfall. I hate editing. So when it comes to editing, I'm like, nope, I have to sit down now and just edit. That's it. But when it comes to writing, I will put on the playlist and go to town.
So sorry, here I had to shut it off here. So what was your playlist for? What was your playlist for Chasing Destiny?
um, it's more for Akantha and Damianos as a couple, rather than the book for that one. They have a few love songs that are just like, love songs. And then there's the songs that they're the angst. I mean, they're, I always joke and say that their theme song is Joan Jett's "I Hate Myself for Loving You," and I'm like, that's them, they. But it's songs like that, and what is it? Rihanna's "I Hate That I Love You." Laurie McAllister did a cover of. Oh my God, I'm totally blanking on his name now. Robbie Hecht, his "A Reckoning of Us." Which when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's them. That is totally them. And I approached Laurie McAllister, who is a dear friend of mine, and I was like, hey, this song really encompasses them and this book and the whole forgiveness and this very rocky relationship and getting to the point where you can forgive each other. I was like, can I give you like $50 for 99 cents per song and give out with when people sign up for the newsletter? And she was like, no. And I'm like, okay. And she's like, no, you can give out as many as you want, and I don't want any money for it. And just as long as I kind of can see like the promotion for it, like the newsletter in the newsletter. And I was like, yeah. So now when you sign up for the newsletter, you get a link to download that song for free.
Neat.
And that's kind of Akantha and Damianos' song.
So do you listen to a different playlist for the scene that you're trying to write, or do you just put on the music and kind of let the story write itself around whatever song is, or like if they're all those type of Joan Jett, "I Hate Myself" type of songs, "For Loving You" type of songs, or if you get to, I don't know, some AC/DC or something, that you're in it, all of a sudden you find yourself writing an action scene.
Yes and no. I'd say the music influences me, but it really doesn't influence the story. It gets me in their heads and the understanding their relationship. For them, yes, that's how it works. But then for other books, I just finished a superhero romance. And I just submitted a full manuscript to my publisher to see if they want to option it. That one definitely has music where it's for an action scene. This is for that action scene.
Mhm.
And this is the music for their relationship, and this is the music for the angst part of it. But for Chasing Destiny, it's not so much that. It's just I would say the garbage songs that are in my playlist are more the action, because they're more upbeat, so they kind of fit the action scenes, but it still deals with the relationship.
Who are some of the artists or some of the songs?
Geez, let me look at my Spotify list. I actually have these. I have posted these once in a while. Well, there's Ellis Paul. I mean, I don't think I have a playlist without Ellis Paul on it. There's some Adele. Anta Duvakot, who is another great folk singer. Billy Joel's on there. Another folk singer named Brian Dunn. The Chicks, which were used to be the Dixie Chicks. Def Leppard, Garth Brooks, Indigo Girls, some Joan Jett, Jim Croce. My music tastes are way over across the
all over the
spectrum.
place. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, there's Lady Gaga on there. There's, I think, probably even some Sinatra on there too. So,
Nice.
and yeah, so my playlists are usually kind of really weird in terms of artists. I mean, there's Queen to Randy Travis, so it's bizarre.
So we took a trip, my family and I took a trip up Mount Washington many years ago, and now they give you a 30-minute CD, and it takes, if you follow the speed limit, it takes you 30 minutes to get up, and they narrate each different point along the way for different things. If I was to upload, or if somebody was to upload your Spotify playlist for Chasing Destiny and they read it at a certain pace, would they be able to follow sort of the tone of the music or the tone of the lyrics or the singer?
Not necessarily. It doesn't kind of go
Doesn't quite work that way.
Yeah. Now, however, the superhero romance that I just finished, I actually had a particular song in mind for each chapter. So with that book, you could really do that with that book, but not with Chasing Destiny.
Well, we'll have to figure out a way to when we either get that book or with Chasing Destiny here, get your playlist for each of your books and say, here, buy the book and somehow get the playlist to go along with it.
Yeah, I have shared Acantha Damianos's playlist, but I can definitely put it in the Facebook chat. That way it'll be there.
Yeah.
Let me figure out how to share this again. It's been a while.
So how has social media helped you or made it more difficult for you as a writer?
It's difficult for me. Because the whole, like, I have seen my fellow City Owl Press authors doing all these, social media posts and whatnot, and I'm just not that type of person to just be like, hey, and just keep promoting. Like, it's hard for me because it's not that I don't want to do it, it's just I don't think about doing it. I like, if it's out of sight, it's completely out of my mind. Unless you're a character who lives in my head, so for me it's tough because it's like, well, how much is too much, and it's a lot of effort to keep on top of it all. And you have all these platforms now. There's Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and TikTok now. My fellow authors are getting into TikTok, and I'm just like, this is all crazy to keep up to.
Yeah, I don't dance, so I don't do TikTok.
I don't either. I dance when I'm cleaning, around the house with the music on.
Right. So do you have like a YouTube channel? That's one of the things that I'm trying to do with these things here. I'm trying to get that.
Yeah.
One of these days I'll sit down. Do you have that for podcasts, blogs, things like that? Do you do those?
No, I don't do that either. It's so much, like I said, it's so much to keep up to. I do use Twitch for my D&D games. I mean, I probably could start doing stuff with my author platform on there, but I never thought about going to YouTube or a podcast.
What are some of the marketing materials? Like we have, like bookmarks, things like that. Well, you do your artist craft fairs. How have those gone with the whole COVID thing?
I did 2 last year. All of last year I did 2. And they were up in Portland, and it was by this people who do PortCon. It's a anime festival every year in Portland, Maine. And every November or December they do an event called Norgeekster. And it's basically a craft show for geeks. And obviously D&D stuff is big there. So they did one in August, and then they did one in November, and I did both of those, and it was oh, and I actually did an outdoor one too, sorry, over in Dover, or Summersworth, I think. I don't know. 2020 was just, it's too hard to remember what happened in 2020. But it was a lot different than normal. Obviously you had the ones inside in Portland, we had to wear masks the whole time. We couldn't eat or drink at our tables. So if you wanted to go grab something, you had to like run to this little back room where you could take off your mask and eat. And the limitation of people in the building at the time too. Because of COVID, I was being very selective about what I did last year, and probably still will this year. I know that those Portland events, I know how they run them, so I'm comfortable going to those. Any other indoor one, I might not be as comfortable going to.
How has it changed? How has COVID or just 2020 changed your writing? Either the writing itself or how you do your writing. And you work with Dani over the internet essentially, so that's probably hasn't changed very much, but the time you get to write.
In general, COVID really hasn't changed much for me, because the only thing I miss is live music.
Oh yes.
But in terms of writing, it hasn't changed. I keep my very similar schedule and patterns that I've established over the years. I do NaNoWriMo every November, and by December 1st, my brain just turns off. It's like, we are not touching any book, nothing. We are not writing until like mid-January or the end of January. And it's a yearly thing. So I kind of expect it. So I'm kind of like, okay, December and January, December is all the holiday stuff. And then January is just kind of like, okay, let's regroup. Let's start thinking about what we want to work on. Well, mostly for me, what I want to work on, when I can start writing. So COVID really hasn't changed anything, because except for the Sunday get-togethers. My writing group that we have for Nano, we continue to meet throughout the year. Every other Sunday we would go to Starbucks, hang out, talk. It's writing is great because it's especially for introverts, because you can just sit there by yourself and be like, yeah, nobody's bothering me. But you miss talking about writing to somebody, and that's what those writing sessions did on Sunday mornings. Every other Sunday morning was to just sit and talk. We talk about our books and we talk about our characters, and you can bounce idea. I think that's the biggest impact it has on me, is that we don't have those face-to-face sessions right now. We do get on audio every other Sunday, but it's not the same.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you do video or audio or something? But
which my writing group is also my D&D group. So
oh well, there you go. So when you write up your quest and then the other person does theirs, do you sometimes think in the back of your head, oh, I could have written that a lot better?
For D&D?
Yeah, for D&D.
No, I don't.
Just putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I don't ever think. I gather ideas from different DMs. There's a lot of forums online that, if you're looking, you're like, oh, I need an encounter. You go up and say, okay, give me a random encounter. Let me see some examples. And so it's kind of like writing a book. You pull from all these sources to incorporate it into what you're doing in your campaign. And then obviously from some of the campaigns, I can pull some of that into my books, and I've pulled stuff from books into a campaign. Nice. And there was an ongoing joke where, as a dungeon master, you can take your favorite story, your favorite fantasy book or movie, and write up a campaign for it. And sometimes the players don't realize that they're basically running the plot of that book. But then when they do, you're just like, oh crap, now I got to change it because they know what's going to happen. So
yeah, you are big into NaNoWriMo. I see you for people that haven't heard any of our other interviews, I do mention this, but it stands for.
National Novel Writing Month.
Thank you.
I'm sorry,
I can.
I was reading comments. That's why.
Oh, yeah. I can never remember what it is, but yeah, I have to hand it to all of you who do that. I'm lucky if I can get 30 words, let alone 30,000 words or 50,000 words in this
Mhm.
case is what they ask
Yeah.
for. But you're right up there. I see you posting all the time that you got 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 words, a day done. And is it
I'm.
something
Oh,
that you try to is it something to just try to keep your brain loose and for writing, or is it something that you try to use as a stepping point for another book?
I use it as to get a first draft out. 50,000 words is a novella. Just in that kind of almost a full novel kind of novella range. Chasing Destiny was a NaNoWriMo project. In fact, it was two because I had to go back and add a lot of stuff because originally it didn't have Damianos's point of view in it, and then it like after like a couple versions, I was like, wait a minute, I really need Damianos's point of view in here. And so I told Dani, I was like, you know what, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna put Damianos in there and give him a point of view, and we were like, okay, that works. And that was a lot of NaNoWriMo for me. So it was actually two nanos for me to get Chasing Destiny. And my superhero romance that I just handed in was 2 years ago for NaNoWriMo. Last year's was another immortal story. Two new immortals to follow. um One of them does show up in the next book that we're wait Richard no, that's book 3, sorry, he appears in book 3. What we're doing is taking like Akantha and Damianos were the main characters in Chasing Destiny. The next book, Akantha is still one of the main POVs, but we introduce some mortals in there who get some POVs. And then there's a character or two who show up in the second book. The third book is about them. So we're kind of using each book, it's not a series where the stories don't continue after each other, but the characters are basically jumping points to introduce new characters.
So as they come out, would say you're on to your the third, fourth book is out. um is somebody able to pick up that book and have an idea of what's going on, or
Yes.
do they really need to start with Chasing Destiny?
No, you don't need to start. You can pick up each individual book as a standalone.
Right.
And then, you could say, oh, well, I like these characters. And you could say, okay, well, this book features this character. So each book will stand alone as a story, but they're interconnected with the characters because the characters cross over into different books.
And have you ever thought about doing, say, like an anthology or a collection of short stories based on the characters in just take Chasing Destiny? Like, there was a daughter mentioned in Chasing
Mhm.
Destiny. Do a short story about her, but do a little bit more of a backstory of your main characters, and maybe a little historical fiction or speculative fiction about Himmler, but then put them in a collection of Chasing Destiny 1.5 or something like that.
I haven't thought of it. And I know Carrie, I'm not surprised Carrie asked that question because we've talked about this. Um, there's a lot more about Akantha and Damianos I would like to explore. It's just kind of coming up with that story for them, not necessarily them together. Um, I've thought about Damianos and maybe since he's been in all these wars and battles throughout history, maybe giving him like a book of his own. But short stories would be totally cool too. I'm not good at small stuff. I'm good at nice, long, overarching, stuff. So it's hard for me to condense something into like a short story length.
The last the last one we had, what was it? Friday, I think it was. We had Jeffy Kennedy, and she has dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of books. There's half a dozen plus different series.
Mhm.
And she has on her website, if you go to her website, it's JEFFE Kennedy.com. She has them all laid out and separated by series, and then it
Mhm.
shows what order you read them in.
Mhm.
And she actually has like dots connecting each one. So you have one, two,
Nice.
three, but then a little side thing that has 3.5, and then it goes back into four and stuff. So that's kind of what I was thinking with the.
Well, I have written scenes. They're not necessarily short stories. They're scenes that there was a chapter I took out of Chasing Destiny that Halakantha met Matthias. So that's kind of a nice like little scene how they met. And I we call them blurbs. Carrie and I, or Dani and I, do them as blurbs, and we just keep them in a file. And we're like, well, if we use them, we use them. If not, we give them out as bonus materials for our mailing list. Saying here's an exclusive, scene that you will never see. That only you guys get to see. But there's way more immortals than what we've put into books right now, and I want to write stories for all of them. One of the thing that's been Morana, who was introduced in Chasing Destiny for a scene or two. The thought I had with her was doing something with the Monuments Men, rushing around Europe trying to save priceless art from the Nazis. And I was like, yeah, it might be an idea. So, there's ideas and there's stories waiting to be told. I just have to kind of wait for them to reveal themselves to me.
So what's the shortest nano story that that particular year just didn't work out? How long have you been doing NaNoWriMo?
I have been doing Nano since 2004. There were a few years I missed. I think 2016, I know I didn't do it because I just got my house and I was rushing around to get the living room remodeled before Thanksgiving. So I was like, there's going to be no Nano this month. So 2004, I have won it every time that I have started it. I have done it except for 2016. I tried to start it and I was just like, I gave up on that one. The shortest one I think was like 50,100 words and it was unfinished because I was just like,
wow.
I hit that 50,000 mark and I was just like, and that at that time when I was doing it, it was 11:59 p.m. on the end of November. At that point I was just making the deadlines. Since becoming a municipal liaison and running word sprints, now I'm finishing. This year I think was the 14th or 15th, and last 2020 was the 14th, about mid-month, and then 2019 was just a few days after that. So every year now I'm getting quicker and quicker, and I'm like, maybe I'll be one of those people that finishes it within like 3 days one of these times, but never, probably not.
So do you automatically stop at 50? Well, you did 50,100, but have you ever realized that you did 60 or 70,000 because you were just in the zone through that month?
It's kind of funny is that my brain, as soon as it knows it hits that 50,000, it goes, we're done. we're turning off. And I'm like, but I want to keep going. Yeah, it's just something with my brain because every free moment in November is just focused on writing. And once you hit that goal, your brain is just like, I need a break. And that's what happens to me. One of these years, I want to try to do a double nano, which is 100K, which at the pace I write now, I could do it, but I just have to get my mind to want to keep going.
Yikes, says Carrie. So you and Dani published Chasing Destiny with, I get it backwards. Is it Owl City or City Owl?
City Owl.
City Owl. And your next one's going to be published through them as well.
Yep.
How did you decide, between the two of you, how did you decide to go with a traditional publisher versus publishing it yourself?
Well, we we got our book deal through a Twitter event. But we, even before we were going to publish, we both decided together to say, well, we want to try the traditional route first. You know, we want to go through the whole process, querying and try to find a agent or a publisher that way. And we did. It was a pit mad, which is pitch madness on Twitter, where you pitch your book in a tweet and you put the appropriate hashtags. And then if agents or editors are interested in it, they like it, and then you submit to them. And so that's what we did. And it was Amanda Roberts from City Owl who responded to the pitch. And on the day after Christmas that year is when we got the email. You know, we submitted it, we put in our query, and the day after Christmas is when we got the email saying, hey, we want to option your book. The email came in on Christmas Day. I just didn't check my email Christmas Day.
So City Owl Press, it's a romance and speculative fiction publisher. So that's one of their specialized, a small press. They're out of New York, I believe. So that's how they found you, because you had this romance, sort of speculative fiction, romance, fantasy romance thing. Well, that's good. So what do they do the editing for you? Because you say you're in the editing phase now of the next book. Do you toss it back and forth between you and Dani first, then submit it to them, and then they go through their set of edits? And
so this one that we're working on, it's called Immortal Secrets, we already have the contract for it. And we decided we needed to change some things. So we said, okay, let us change stuff, and then, you know, we'll send it back to you. And during that process, we went, you know what, let's get a professional editor to do this. Let's have a professional editor go through it. That way, when we give it back to City Owl, for them to go through, you know, it'll be cleaned up. So we make sure we edit between the two of us, probably 2 or 3 passes before we query. And then with City Owl, we do 2 or 3 more rounds of editing with the City Owl. But this one, we decided to add in our own extra professional editor as well.
how did you choose the cover? Because this is a fantastic cover.
Thank you.
And how important is a cover?
I think it's very important because that's the first thing that people are going to see. I have some background in art. I took art classes all through high school, and so I'm very particular about colors and, you know, about. They gave us one cover. The first mock-up was looks like kind of like the trend that's going on now with, like, you know, the person, the glow behind them. And I was like, I want something different. And there was a series of books out by Carrie Maniscalco. Her first book was called Stalking Jack the Ripper. And it's a great YA series. And I loved her cover. And I was like, this is a beautiful cover, and I want something similar to this. Not obviously copying it from Street, but I wanted something similar to this. So after they gave us the first mock-up, I had this like massively long email ready, and I'm like, okay, first of all, let's address the colors. There's none in this, you know, and I'm like, you know, and I'm like, blah, 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 blah. And I wasn't even done composing the email when our publisher came back and said, because they asked for our ideas, and I put it in. So we got this one back, and I was like drafting up this email, and then I got an email from them before I even finished my long, in-depth, you know, critique of this cover. They're like, no, we want to go something more with what you suggested. And I was like, great. And I was like, throw the email away now. And so we got the second back, and I was like, this is much better. And then I was like, okay, now I'm going to start nitpicking the very little things in this one. I like this idea and where it's going, but here's the suggestions I have. So we got a lot of input into what the cover looked like. and I was very happy with the results that we got back. Although now we just got an email from them saying, "Hey, let's redo your cover," and I'm like, "But, but okay, fine. We'll I'm open to it. I didn't say no. I said I'm open to it, but we'll see what we get back."
Well, you could just definitely take a look at the cover. You've got everything. You've got the spear. You've got, your female protagonist there, and just again, the design of the text is wonderful. It's dark, like you said, a lot of romance. Because when I think of before all this started, I thought of romance as, like the Fabio on the white horse, on the beach, and
Yeah.
the girl in the flowing gown, or the castle in the background, which could be kind of fantasy too, but if it was a more of a historical romance type thing. Um, but this is, you can tell it's got a darker theme to it
Mhm.
because of the darker cover. But again, you got the spear, so you know that there's something, it tells you a little bit what the
Mhm.
book is about, which is what a book cover is supposed
Yeah.
should do. Um, do you have a date for the new book?
I do not. Most likely to be early next year, like
Next year.
January, February next year would be my guess, because I'm cleaning up the edits that we got back from the editor that we hired. And as soon as that's done, which I'm hoping to have it done by the end of this weekend, it'll go to our publisher. And then it'll be a couple more months back and forth. And that's when they'll find out when they have a place on the schedule for it.
Do you think COVID has affected publishing dates, either for you
Uh,
or just in general? Have you heard? Because that's one thing that we've heard from
I think it
a, a,
has.
a few people. Because obviously the big names, they've gotten backed up
Mhm.
in publishing things. Do the small presses still have that problem as well? Things that should have been published
I
in
think
2020?
so. I think so. I haven't heard too much from my fellow authors under the City Owl umbrella, but I think COVID has definitely affected probably every aspect of our lives, including, release dates and stuff like that.
So we got a few minutes left, and so I'd like to get to
Mhm.
what I think is kind of a fun part. Um, if you were to have a screenwriter come to you for Chasing Destiny,
I think I know where this is
um,
going.
would you like to see, what would you like? Love to see it on the big screen, or maybe the small screen, like either cable or like HBO, or some sort of streaming Hulu or something like that, or just a couple hour TV.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to see a picturized version of the book out there.
Who would you have play your characters? Did
Oh,
you
well,
have? Well, let me start with this. Back to the book cover, you only show her kind of from the
yeah.
bottom lip down, so you don't see the face. So was that intentional so that the reader would get um, their own? Because I love reading a book before seeing a movie, because then I can get my own idea of what the character looks like, and then I'm always disappointed in the movie. But um, did you go into that having that in mind as far as the cover goes? And then we've talked to some writers who have a picture in their head of the person that they're writing about, the character they're writing, and some just say no, just kind of, they're this tall and they wear this type of clothes, and they just kind of let it be more like that.
No, I actually have. What I do is when we come up with an idea for a character, we call it finding a face. It doesn't have to be exact, but we'll find like an actor or an actress or somebody who kind of best resembles the character and kind of use that as like their face. So when we're writing, it's like, oh, I need a description. So I'll go look at a picture of that person, like what kind of nose, what shape nose they have. So I always have faces for all of my characters, even if like they never ever are shown. I have them and I can reference them. And for Akantha, it would be Katie Mcgrath. She was in the series Merlin. She is currently in Supergirl, the CW show Supergirl.
Okay.
So she's an actress, well-known actress. Um, and you're going to ask me about Damianos, and I know his first name is Christos, but I can never remember his last name. He's a Greek actor, and he shows up in like the weirdest places. Like I'll be watching a show and I'm like, oh my God, that's him. Like, because, I totally don't expect to see him. And I think the latest, it was 2 years ago, it was called Whiskey Cavalier was a show. It had one of the actors from The Walking Dead in it, and Scott Foley, and it was one episode, and I was just like, that guy, there's Davianos. It's like now when I see those actors and actresses, I'm like, that's Akantha, or that's Damianos. So
Is it Christos Vasilopoulos?
yes.
Okay. Well, now I have a picture in my head. Next time I read it again.
Well, that was one of the first issues with the first cover that we got, because I think they had like brown eyes on Akantha, and I'm like, she doesn't have brown eyes. I'm like, the character has gray eyes. If we're going to do this cover with showing her face, it's got to be accurate.
So how did you choose? Why did you decide not to show all of her face? Was that your decision, Danny's decision, the artist's decision, publisher?
I told them it wasn't necessary because, like they said, the covers from Carrie Maniscalco's books, they just kind of had that, chin up, and so our cover really is in the vein of her books. And I was like, we don't really need to see her face, because I'm going to be picky about eye color. If you really want me to be picky about stuff, go ahead and do it. But I'm going to be really picky about getting things right, because I think that stems from Robert Jordan's books. I read the Wheel of Time series, all of them, and the art on the covers never ever matched the inside of the books. And I'm like, what is going on here? It's like the cover should be the inside of the book. What's going on in the middle?
So would you like to see it as just a standalone movie, or what do you think about a TV series? Do you think it could be some kind of a mini series?
I think well, because it's loosely, some of the inspiration was from Warehouse 13, it could go the route of TV show, but I think I would kind of like the standalone 2-hour movie. And but I mean, there's also the Highlander TV series too, which is a running joke in the next books, that whenever somebody's, especially people learning about the Immortals, they're like, oh, will you die if your head gets cut off? And they're like, don't mention those movies, so it's a running joke. But obviously those movies and the TV show do have some influence on this book too, because we were like, yeah, let's not do, we want to make it different. So I kind of like the standalone movie idea better.
So we know that you're a fan of Raiders. You're a fan of I know you're a big Star Trek fan, DS9, and
Yep.
well, especially the new
Discovery.
Discovery. We don't watch it live, but we get it when it becomes available for free. So we're slowly getting caught up on that. So you're a big sci-fi fan, and you got R2D2 on your as a text message. What are some of your favorite authors to read?
I haven't read too much sci-fi. I started with Piers Anthony. That's how I got into fantasy too, because I've always been like, I always loved like Greek and Roman mythology, and so fantasy was a normal thing. But then came Piers Anthony with this series where he was blending sci-fi and fantasy, and I was just enthralled. Like, this is really cool. There's one world that is all computers and technology, and then there's this other world with magic. And I was like, and he just combined the two, and I was like, this is great. And this was 7th grade me. And at that point, mostly I read fantasy, Terry Brooks, David Eddings, Robert Jordan, started with George R.R. Martin later. And I must say, I can never get through Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I have issues with those books, and tried 4 times, still can't finish it. But I have read some sci-fi, just not a lot, not as much as I watch.
Terry Brooks is one of my favorites. His Shannara series Of course,
Yeah.
the core series, then there's the
Yeah.
sequels, and then the prequels. You find that well, I found that it kind of became predictable. Some of his later stuff,
Yeah.
his formula was kind of predictable.
Yeah.
Is that one thing you worry about with writing so many books?
Um,
That your writing style really I mean, you always have a writing style because you want people to recognize, oh yeah, this is Sydney Ashcroft and Dani Nichols, because you can tell by their writing style if you just pick up a book,
mhm.
um but do you have a particular formula that you try to follow?
Well, I'm starting being a nano ML, we've done writing workshops for our nano folks, and a lot of it we focused on story structure. Save the cat method. For romance, I tend to like one called it's by book by Gwen Hayes called Romancing the Beat. And it basically lays out the beats that you want to hit. Like kind of like this is the beats you want to hit in your story, and then obviously how you compose that story around those beats is entirely up to you. I want to be not predictable. Chasing Destiny was not done using Romancing the Beat because I didn't know about it. My superhero romance was, and I find it's easier to plot when you have that structure there, that you can craft a story around it. But in terms of the story itself, I don't want to be predictable. So I like the twists and turns, especially the twist in Chasing Destiny, which I will not spoil.
Yep.
I was like, oh, what if this happens? That's a killer. And I'm like, yeah, we're gonna do it. And the same thing with the superhero romance that I did. I was like, I love that one. The twist in that I absolutely love. But I try not to be predictable, even with the characters themselves. Like there's always going to be something I'm always going to try to put something in there that nobody expects.
Nice. So final question. What's the one book that you read that you never thought you would read and you thoroughly enjoyed? Something totally off the beaten path of what you typically read.
The memoirs of U.S. Grant, Ulysses S. Grant. I love history, but I'm not a big nonfiction reader. Um, very rarely I'll find a nonfiction book and I'll just read it. There was a Peter the Great biography that I read that I absolutely loved, but it's very far and few in between when I actually pick up a nonfiction book and read it. I watched the History Channel special on Grant, and I was like, I got to read his memoirs now. And it's there's not as there's obviously not a story structure to it. It's just him relating his experiences during the American Mexican War and the Civil War, and I'm just like fascinated with it. I'm just like reading about these battles from his perspective, and I'm like, this is awesome, like. So I really didn't expect to get that into it. I expected to start it and just be like, yeah, okay, we'll put it down, but totally plowing through it.
Cool. So I'll have to look into it.
There are some Civil War stories I have in mind, so that might be an influencer.
Well, Sydney, thank you very much. Our time's up. I just want to say thank you very much for being a part of this, and it's great that you live so close so that we can have you in pretty much any time once we can start doing that again. Again, right now the book is Chasing Destiny, Sydney Ashcroft and Dani Nichols. I have at least one signed copy left. I'll have some more very soon. It's one thing that kind of catches up with me when I realize that, oh my goodness, I only got one book left. I got my little ring on the phone that says you're down to one book, but yeah, okay, I'll get it later. But anyways, you can still get it from us. Bookshelf.org is another great place to do it. One thing we didn't touch on was audiobooks. I'd love to see it as an audiobook through Libro FM.
I would love to see it as an audiobook too. The terms of our publishers, we have to sell so many before we could get that audiobook made.
Okay.
So.
Well, definitely let me know when it's available through Libro FM, and we'll promote the heck out of it. As soon as you can get it covered to me for your new book, I'll gladly splash that on all our social media and everything, and you can put it up for advanced ordering. And Any other questions or anything? Very cool to hear from you.
Thank you for
And
having me on. I appreciate
no,
it.
you're welcome. Best of luck to you and Danny. Say hi
Thank
to
you.
Danny for me.
I will. Take
All
care.
right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.